Episode number 56, How to Think Big But Act Small with Elisha Voetberg. All right, Dad Hackers, one of the things that I struggle with personally, and I know a lot of men struggle with as well, and perhaps you even struggle with it yourself, is taking those little steps day to day that lead to the big results. You know, it's easy to dream big and catch a vision about what could possibly occur in your future, maybe several years down the road or a couple decades. The problem is that the days go by quickly and they add up fast. Then you look back maybe 5 years down the road or 10, 20, or even more, and you realize you're not going in the direction you hoped you'd be going. Your family isn't where you hoped it would be. You haven't invested in the relationships in the way that you hoped you would have invested. And you're just not where you thought you would be at this point in your life. And I think what this gets down to is a problem with being able to think big, but not know how to act on the small level in order to get those results. You see, it's the little things that we do day in and day out that accumulate and add up to the big results and the big changes that we want in life. Well, today I have Elisha Voetberg with us, and he talks with us today about how thinking big but acting small has been very impactful in his life. We talk about different timelines that you need to be thinking about, how to plan out a week. We talk about different systems that he's using to set himself up for God-honoring success in life. And you know, Elisha here, he's one of the younger guys that I've interviewed for the show. He's 28. He's got a family of 2 kids, one on the way. They're just young. They've been married about 3 years. But listen to the things that he has to say. Don't let his age fool you. This man is blessed with a ton of wisdom. He comes from a very large family. It's very tight. He grew up in a Christian home. He has a lot of wisdom passed on down to him from his parents as well as from his in-laws. He's very close with them too. And he has a close-knit church community as well. He has a lot of value to share, and it was really impactful to me, and I know it's going to be impactful to you as well. So make sure you check out the show notes after the episode, dadhackers.us/056. What's up, Dad Hackers? My name is Patrick Antonucci, and I am the host and founder of this podcast and community of Dad Hackers. Now, Dad Hackers is a community of Christian fathers who are devoted to encouraging, equipping, and enabling one another to become the men that God has created and called us to be, so that we can raise up the next generation of fully devoted followers of Christ and leave a legacy of multi-generational faithfulness. Now, on this show, we primarily interview Christian men to dive deep into their experiences and insights into what it means to be a Christian man, a Christian husband, a Christian father, and a Christian leader. We ask questions that dig deep into the thinking and rationale and experiences of these men so that we can all learn and grow into the men that God is calling us to be. I'm so thankful that you've joined us today. Make sure you subscribe so that you never miss any of our value-packed episodes. Also, please make sure you leave an honest review if you're listening to this in iTunes or any other platform that takes reviews. Reviews boost the show's ratings, which means that more dads are going to come across our show and benefit from the content that we put out. I also wanted to let you know that we do have a free private Facebook group just for Christian dads. So after the show, make sure you hop on over to the show notes. There's a link for that in there as well. Okay, Elisha, how you doing today, buddy?
Doing awesome, Patrick. So happy to be here with you.
Yeah, likewise, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and being with us. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, your background for the guys that may not know who you are and what you do, just, you know, little background and context for us.
You got it. So as you already said, my name is Elisha Peter Voetberg, and I'm 28 years old. I'm married to my lovely wife, Katie Joy Voetberg, and we've got 2 children, a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old, and then our third's due here in about 2 months. And so we're really excited about that. I was brought up in a family of 10 children that truly just loved the Lord. I was so blessed, and I'm so grateful to this day to be able to be brought up in a home that read God's word on a daily basis, to have my father who was truly a spiritual leader and loved and cherished my mother. And in so doing, that really made my mother a vibrant lady that just nurtured us children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And to this day, after I guess almost 40 years of marriage, my parents are more in love than ever. And so that's an awesome example that I've had to witness, and I'm really grateful for that. Similarly, my wife Katie is the oldest of 11 children, and her father's actually probably one of the biggest inspirations in my life. Second to my father, Katie's father has been just a huge role model in my life, because her and her parents are extremely sound in their biblical doctrine. They love each other. They're romantic in their marriage, even after having 11 children. So that's something that I really am inspired by as a young father. I know I want to keep romance alive in my marriage. And so oftentimes from the outside, it seems like when you're looking in on other people's marriages, you see kids become the priority in people's marriages and in their family. And as a result, their marriage kind of fades or becomes less exciting than, what they maybe would hope for it to be. And so I feel really blessed that I've got examples on both sides, my family as well as my wife's family that have just abundant families, fruitful families with their children walking in the faith and then carrying on this fruitful marriage as well.
That's so awesome, man. Elisha, I got to tell you, I mean, it literally almost brought a tear to my eye hearing your story, because that's the vision that I have for my family. Like I was talking before we started recording, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. My mom became a Christian when I was 13. I just literally a month ago got the opportunity to baptize my 87-year-old father. And
wow.
Yeah, crazy stuff. I mean, that's over 20 years of prayer right there.
Wow.
But my whole point is, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. And a lot of the guys that listen to the podcast didn't either. And we're trying to figure it out,
Yeah.
And I knew a little bit about your background too. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, because I like to hear also, and a lot of the guys too, like to hear some of the results of what happens when you begin to create a legacy. And you're the next step, so to speak, from your legacy. And now you're doing it with your children. And that's just awesome. I mean, that's our vision. We want to become the men that God's created and designed us to be, so that we can raise up the next generation of fully devoted followers of Christ and leave a legacy of multi-generational faithfulness. Not just the next one, but the one after that. And
that's right. Yeah, your children's children are your inheritance from the Lord, and your crown of glory. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's just amazing hearing just that little bit of testimony about your family and that little bit of context. And 10 kids and 11 kids, man.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you, are you guys planning on having a large family, or
yeah, I mean, as you
got your third one on the way, but
yeah, you're right. So that's definitely a common question that we get, and rightfully so. We're both from big families, and we're off to a pretty quick start. We're going to have 3 children in our first 3 years of marriage, and we just view children as a blessing. I think that the Bible is so explicitly clear on declaring that children are a blessing, and it doesn't give any parameters for when they're a blessing or if they're ever not a blessing. It just says they're a blessing. And so we have that mindset. That said, we're totally open-handed in really realizing kind of this freedom that we have to more or less naturally plan a family. And so after our third child, I think that we really want to evaluate, give ourselves, a little bit of a breather. But I think, Lord willing, we'll be able to have a large family. And for Katie and I, that number, it's always changing in our brain. That might seem like 7 kids one day, or maybe we want to have 17 kids. I mean, I don't know. It's all relative, and so many things can change, depending on our health, my wife's health, the health of our children. And so we certainly are leaving that as an open-handed, I guess, vision, but we just view children as a blessing.
That's great. And man, they sure are. The Bible says, just like you quoted the verse. Yeah. So one of the things that you and I talked about is like setting up your family so that you can like promote this sense of a positive family culture. And like you have a good solid background, and what it's like to have children that are a blessing. a lot of guys don't get to come from that. So
Sure.
what does it mean to have a positive family culture to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do feel like I've been on the other side of what you just referenced. You
Right.
said a lot of your listeners, or you, for instance, are maybe kind of you're a first generation believer. Maybe that's the case for a lot of people, and they haven't seen this family exemplified in a firsthand way. And so growing up, what was normal to me was a father and mother that were loving, a very, looking back, healthy family culture where we loved being together. We loved engaging with one another, participating in sports, playing music together. And that was similar with my wife, Katie. And so family was always a very positive thing. And then as I entered into marriage, I viewed marriage as a good thing. I viewed family as a good thing. But then I really started to become sensitive to kind of the voices of the outside world, whether that was secular culture or even, unfortunately, Christian culture, having a lot of negative opinions about family and these negative connotations that came with marriage and having children. And I kind of almost got defensive because even as a Christian man, and I would tell other Christian men, hey, I'm engaged. And they say, oh, well, say goodbye to your freedom. Here comes the ball and chain.
Yeah,
And
what's up with that?
I know there's these isms, and I made a point to never laugh because I know it's just kind of a cultural joke, but I think it's just too derogatory directed towards what God said is a good thing and a blessed thing. And that's not to say that there are challenges that come with each one of these gifts of marriage and of having children. That goes without saying, I think. But to let that overshadow the true blessing that they are, I think is not doing it justice, and it's extremely unfair. And so as a newly married man, and then when we became pregnant with our first child, and we were feeling kind of, I wouldn't even use the word criticism, but more people just having a negative connotation towards, oh, well, here comes the kids, say goodbye to your freedom once again. And then our second child. And I really started realizing that, man, people's mindsets around family is just not, in my mind, right. I don't think that it's biblical. And what I saw is that when people did embrace maybe more of a biblical mindset regarding family, they took it almost as a self-righteous step, saying, okay, well, I'm going to forsake all of these pleasures of the world, the ability to, if you're a guy, maybe go skiing. I love skiing, so I'm going to
Right.
forsake, my skiing. I'm going to forsake playing basketball and going golfing and hanging out with the guys in the evening time because that's dumb. And I'm going to do something more holy and righteous and raise up children. And they take on kind of this martyrdom mindset of, man, I'm going to, they use phrases like, I'm going to die to myself and I'm going to pour into my wife. And I'm thinking, man, you can use that terminology, but don't use it in the context of this awesome thing as family, because again, using that scripture of husbands lay down your life for your wife, we're still the ones that come out on top of that. So that what? So that Christ will present your bride to you as a lovely person. And when you think of that analogy of Christ laying his life down for the church, he's the one that's reigning on the right hand of God. It didn't just stop with Christ laying his life down for his bride.
That's
There's
a good
victory
point.
out. And so often I think when you feel the outside pressures of the world, which are inevitable. I mean, I will be the first to say as a young father, when I had my first child, I felt more pressure. And when I had my second child, I felt more financial pressure, and sleep becomes less. You're getting less sleep. You're feeling these physical ramifications and the mental stress. And I think there's spiritual stress and all those things too, because now you're the spiritual head of more people. And so those are real things, but that's when I need to stop listening to my emotions and to my feelings, and certainly to secular culture, and start just listening to God's word and say, hey, you know what, this is definitely a blessing. And so I want to find the blessing in family. I want to find the blessing in marriage. And that's something that Katie and I are both continually reminding ourselves to do when it doesn't feel like a blessing or when it doesn't seem like a blessing. The faults, it's our mind that's wrong then, because God said it's a blessing. And if he has, like Second Peter tells us, if we've been given all things that pertain unto life and godliness through the knowledge of him that has called us to glory and virtue, whereby are given unto us exceedingly great and precious promises, that you might be partakers of his divine nature. Well, then if that's all taken care of at the cross and the resurrection of Christ, and we're feeling these short-term, I guess, pains of sleep deprivation or financial stress or some marital conflict, well, then that's on us, and we can just look for the blessing beyond that.
Good stuff, man. I like it. Sounds like
Yes.
you've said some of that before, huh?
Well, it's funny. Kate and I were just talking about this because we just grew up with a lot of these mindsets, and I feel so
Yeah.
grateful for that. Because belief, just what you believe when it's challenged with marital strife or with, physical ailments, then what you truly believe, I think, is revealed. And I can't thank my parents enough and thank the Lord enough for instilling in me. And it's just not even of my own doing. I wasn't a 12-year-old boy that wanted to become a theologian. I was just around a lot of this truth. So I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, that's such a blessing, and I love how you keep referring back to the culture that you grew up in, because this is the kind of culture that I'm trying to create and didn't have, and it's kind of like you're almost pulling back the curtain and saying, "Hey, look, this is what it could be like for your kids." You know what I
Sure.
mean? And
Yeah.
so you talk about finding the blessing in family and in marriage, and you have to look for that. It's in sometimes when there's conflict or strife or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
How do you like walk us through maybe, or walk me through maybe, uh, I don't know, specific situation or not, but just how do you look for the blessing? Like what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, I think that the big picture is, for me, it's easier to see the blessing in that. You've talked about when when you have this mindset of, okay, I'm going to invest deeply into my one or two or three or five children, then you can start to see the impact that that can have over years, right? It might seem so small in the moment when you're training. For me right now, I'm training my 2-year-old to simply obey. That's just a big deal for having my 2-year-old obey.
Yeah.
But when you're able to see that, man, 20 years down the road, he's going to be growing up. He's going to be growing his own generation of believers, and then you start to see the manifestation of that, where it's multiplied so many different ways. So you have to have that big picture, I think, to start with. Whereas opposed to, I think the short term mindset says, man, okay, I've got 3 kids or I've got 1 kid, whatever the number of children are, and they're certainly, I can believe that they're a blessing, but they're also, it's just harder work to stay at home and to train my children. I think I'm going to put my time and my energy out more into the workplace, where I get more affirmation from either my coworkers or my employer, or if you're a business owner, you get it from your customers. And that's just a lot more affirming, I think, to yourself and to your ego. But truthfully, that takes less faith. It takes more faith to say, hey, I'm going to pour into my children right now for the blessing to come. And so I think
Yeah.
having that big picture vision is so crucial, because the fact is even though it's a big picture vision, it's only going to be played out in the day in and day out basis, right? That's actually when you start cultivating for the fruit that's to come. And that's just a constant thing that I'm reminding myself of this morning. I was reminding myself of it again as my 2-year-old is once again, showing his will more and more. His will is growing. And I'm thinking, man, it's so easy to try to like turn a blind eye and be like, okay, I'm going to act like like I didn't see him disobey me. But in
Yeah.
reality, that's not doing him any favors, because it's one thing when he's, stubborn and willful and rebellious as a 2-year-old, but when he's rebelling not just against me, but to God as a 16-year-old and as a 19-year-old, then that's where it really becomes an eternal situation. And when I have that mindset of, man, I'm cultivating in my son either a heart of submission to me and then to God, in the future, then that really motivates me to set my phone down, or set my coffee down and take that 2 to 5 minutes of being faithful in the discipline at this young age. And so that's something that I know it's just, and I'm speaking as a young father, I can only imagine that so many of your listeners are down the road from where I'm at, where they're older, they've been married for more years, and they've got children that are even older. And so I know that I've just started this journey of being a father and of training my children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. But I don't want to look past today. And regardless of what stage I'm at as a father, when I do have a teenage son or a son that's pursuing a daughter, I don't want to look past that day and the fruit that can come from it.
Yeah, definitely, man. And what you talk about being right in the thick of it in the day to day, it's so easy to just discipline them with an eye toward getting them to stop doing whatever disobedient behavior it is. And lots of
Yes.
times that results in ineffective parenting techniques like just screaming and yelling, or compromise, or
Right.
bribe, or unnecessary punishments or
Yes.
cruelty. And
Totally.
that's where a lot of dads really kind of drop the ball, because you talk about losing sleep. I mean, you're tired, you're probably
Mm.
stressed out, maybe you got financial problems, maybe your marriage isn't as great as it should be or that you want it, and so you have
Yeah.
all these things, and then your kids over there testing the fence, is what I like to call
Right.
it, just
Yeah.
pressing on that fence, seeing if it's going to stand up, and you just like, you could snap. And
Yeah.
it's hard in that moment. And I'll confess, like, I'm not perfect all the time, obviously. And but having that larger vision for what you're creating can really, really, really impact the day to day and nitty gritty. And I'm glad the way you bring it up, because you really come from, I keep saying this, but it's true. You come from a family that's bore the fruit of that type of culture, where you have that bigger vision, and so
Hmm.
you're able to see where you're coming from, and you're able to see what the potential is with your kids.
Sure.
That's what I want to see with my kids, and that's what the other guys and dad hackers that listen to the podcasts and are in our community and stuff, that's what they want. They want
Yes.
this type of family. And
Hmm.
this, in these little instances, like you're just trying to train your 2-year-old to obey, that's where those little day-to-day battles, you got to win those, but you have
Yeah.
to win them in the right way. Yeah.
Yes. Amen.
Cool. You talked about wanting to keep the romance alive, and how
Hmm.
your parents and Katie's parents are still very romantic with one another. What are some things you're doing now, even at the outset of your marriage, just a couple years in? What are you doing now to keep the romance alive so that it doesn't burn out?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I still consider us newlyweds, and so we'll see how effective these strategies are in years to come. But I have no expectation for the romance to drop off. I think, and I think it's crazy. Your expectation, I think, is a huge deal. And when you have an expectation of, hey, well, it's good now, but when we have 3 or 4 or 5 children, or when they get older, we can't be as intentional about date night, or about romance, or about intimacy. Some things are just going to have to be put on hold for the time being. I think that's not a necessary mindset. You don't have to have that expectation. And so having the expectation, Katie and I talk about this in having that example of parents that are still romantically attracted to one another. We are looking for ways at this point of being newlyweds to keep the romance alive. And it's crazy how those basic things are really what make romance, in my mind, stay alive. And I really take a lot of my cues from my dad and from my father-in-law. And it can be as simple as, putting toothpaste on your wife's toothbrush before you go to bed. Those little gestures go forever. I can speak as a recipient of that. Like, I don't care what we just went through before we headed to bed, but if I get out of the shower and I see Katie's put toothpaste on my toothbrush, then my heart just like melts, and I'm just so excited to be her husband. And so I think remembering some of those habits, and I know that strategy is one thing. Saying, okay, I've strategized to be a romantic husband, for the rest of my life. But I want to develop tactics as well as strategy that actually make that happen and that move it forward. And things like, hugging my wife on a regular basis, telling her she's beautiful, bringing flowers home on a regular basis. Those things are so cliche, but those are the tactics in my mind of romance, and so I really want to start now and letting those habits be established, so that whether the feelings are there or not, oftentimes it's your actions that lead your feelings. And ultimately, we shouldn't be, led by our feelings most of the time. Our feelings can be very deceitful. And so when you incorporate actions and habits that in turn will lead your feelings in romance, then I think that you're going to be able to have a sustained romantic life. And so that's really what my goal is now at this time in our young marriage, where it is so easy to be romantic. We're young, we're energetic, we're healthy. It's just so fun to be romantic now. But I can foresee there being times in the future where being romantic doesn't seem like the first thing to do, but I want to have habits in place by that point so that the romance is still happening.
Yeah, that's excellent. Put those things in place now so that down the road they're already there, and you can kind of lean on them when you need to lean on them.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with respect to, now that you have some kids,
Yeah.
what are you doing so that, lots of times married couples, they have kids and then the focus is just on the children.
Yeah.
And then 20 years later, when the children move out, you got two strangers living together.
Yep.
How are you balancing that? Still being intentional with your children and doing these tactics and strategies to keep the romance alive so that, you know, however many years down the road, you still have a wife that you're romantically involved with when the kids are
Sure.
out of the house.
Sure. Yeah. I would say that the complexity of our child training at this point is still very low. It's not taking very much emotional energy from Katie or myself to train our children because they're not, mentally developed as much, as maybe a 10-year-old is, where you're emotionally having to connect with your 10-year-old or your 12-year-old or your 13-year-old. And I think that having to pour out emotionally with your child training is oftentimes what can take away from your romance. But that said, child training still takes time away from us right now, and
Right.
time away from each other, even if it's not as emotional and just more practical. And
Or
so,
just the baby getting up in the middle of the night, or
hey,
feeding
that's
the
right.
kids and all the
Yep.
extra duties and responsibilities that come along, even if you have one newborn in the house and that's it.
Yes, 100%. And so Katie and I really protect our date night. We have a weekly date night. And for about half the year, Katie's family lives in our hometown, which is really great because they love taking care of our kids. Because, babysitters, that's just a huge deal. It's crazy how these practical things are really can be a make it or break it when it comes to things like date night. And for Katie and I, date night is so integral to us feeling connected because we can see each other in passing all day long and not be emotionally connected. And then all of a sudden, somebody takes the kids, they're watching them for 3 hours or for however many hours, and we get to look at each other over dinner or over a walk or whatever it is, and really have that time of heart to heart, soul to soul connection. And to me, that's got to be a no. That's just got to be a no brainer. We have to do our date night once a week, and we have to make that happen. And then in addition to that, Katie and I have really made a point to get up early in the morning and have this time before the children get up to align our day, not only as an individual so that we know what I have to accomplish that day as an individual, but that we can really align our day as a couple. And I think having that first hour or hour and a half in the morning of quietness before, whether the house is still quiet, the children are still in bed, for us to really align our day is extremely important for Katie and I. And I know that we want to continue that as our children grow older and the level of complexity grows with our family and the level of emotional output in our child training grows. We really want to protect that morning time on a daily basis as well.
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily that you have to do it in the morning, because I know a lot of guys, like for me, I get up at 4:15 in the morning and I'm out of the house before anybody else
Yeah.
is. I don't think it's necessarily the time of
Right.
day that you do it. It's
Right.
that you do it. And that's one of the things I wanted to pick your brain on was what are what are you doing during that time? Sounds like you guys are pretty organized, very intentional and on purpose with what you do with each other and with your children and with your business and um, in your time. And so I'm curious, what are you guys doing during that time as far as aligning your schedules and planning out your day and like systems and routines and those types of things?
Yeah, sure. It's dynamic. Okay. So
Right.
things are always going to be changing as children are teething and they're not sleeping, the normal schedule. And so you're kind of adjusting to that, or work might be busy for a season, or I still play concerts with my family band. And so, a concert season might throw off our schedule. But in general, we try to keep to some rules, and I already mentioned one of them, the morning time. And like you said, it doesn't have to be the morning time. It's that time, I think, of intentional clear-headedness where the busyness of the day hasn't overcome you yet. Because I feel like we can all relate to that, just being behind the eight ball, where it's like the day's already going. The kids are already demanding our time and demanding our attention. and you're just playing catch up the rest of the day. And so whether that's in the morning or whether it's in the evening time, preparing for the next day, I think Katie and I really, really try to protect those times, those bookends. So the morning time, and then at nighttime, shutting the phones off, turning media off, turning the computers off, or whatever, television, whatever it is, off, by 9 p.m. so that we can have at least an hour to really connect with each other prior to the day. And then when we have those bookends, so much of what transpires, in the middle of the day sometimes is out of our control, but we know that those bookends are there for us to really have a time to connect and evaluate where we're actually heading with our life.
Awesome. So do you guys have like a big schedule or a planner that you're planning out your day and your week and your month and your year and all of that type of thing? Or is it a day to day, a week to week? I mean, how are you keeping track? Because this is a big thing for a lot of guys, is that we really struggle with having enough time to do everything that we want to do, or just to meet our duties and responsibilities, or just finding that balance between work life and family life. It's a real struggle for a lot of us guys, because just busy,
Yes. Yeah, Katie and I love talking about different time frames. And Katie's father he's a great coach. He's an awesome coach to highly successful entrepreneurs. And they always talk in different timelines, and so sometimes we'll hear, the 3 most important timelines to consider are the 30-year timeline. So 30 years from now, the 3-year timeline, and then the 30-day timeline, right? So 30 years from now, you have to have this big picture vision. 3 years from now, it's a little shorter term than 30 days. It's even more short term, so you have to start taking action. So Katie and I will discuss that from time to time. But what we consistently do is plan out our 7-day week. So Sunday evening comes around, and the busyness of church is done for the day. We're getting ready for Monday, and we always find time to prepare for the week to come. And that includes, if we're having anybody over for dinner. It includes if we have any out of the ordinary events coming up. And that time, whether it takes a half hour or an hour, however long it takes, it really gives us a focus for that week. And so whether our 90-day goals vary or don't vary, we always establish that weekly rhythm, on Sunday night.
Yeah, Jessica and I recently started doing this a couple months ago, where we sit down on Sunday night too, after church and the kids are in bed, and we'll just review our week. And it's literally like, what are you doing Monday? What am I doing Monday? We go through the whole week. We plan out our menu. We make our grocery list, and that's it. But I'll tell you what, it takes 15, 20 minutes, maybe. Sometimes it's a little hard to come up with a menu, but it's helped tremendously.
Man,
with communication and being on the same page, and things not just popping up that she didn't know about, that I thought she knew about, that I thought about but never actually said to her. And then that helps reduce the conflict and the stress and the surprises and things like that.
Yes. And I love, because it's funny, I was thinking about just this week, and on Sunday we had our time of planning the week, and we felt very organized. And I think it was yesterday morning that Katie had forgotten about the commitment that she had. But when you have forgotten one thing like that, then you're bringing it up in the context of, oh man, I'm so sorry. I know we had our meeting on Sunday night. We talked about this, but I totally forgot to mention this. And there's so much more grace and I guess just open communication, even when your schedule is thrown off. Because I don't know about you, but even though we make our schedule on Sunday night, it's inevitable that something's going to throw it off by midweek. Something out of the ordinary is going to come up. And, but to be able to at least have a framework to work around opens up that line of communication, rather than not having any context when you dive into the week.
Yeah. And then that kind of pop-up thing is just that. It's a pop-up thing. It's the exception rather than the rule.
Yes.
Working from a place of being on the same page, and that just pops up once in a while, rather than being in totally separate books and like it's always just flying by the seat of your pants.
Right.
So when you sit down, I want to go back to the timelines that you talked about, the 30 years, 3 years, 30 days. Do you guys like sit down once a year and like sketch out your big vision for the next 30 years? Or maybe how's that work? That's like 30,000 foot view. You know what I mean? That's so far
Yep.
out. Like,
Yeah.
what's that conversation look like?
Katie and I are both big dreamers, and both of our fathers are big dreamers. And so, since the time we were engaged and preparing for our marriage, we loved talking big picture. That 30,000 foot view was kind of naturally where we went. And over time, we've had to learn to be more strategic and practical in the day to day life. Because I think, if you were to point out two, prominent personalities, there's like the visionary and there's the very practical guy. And that's, I know, a general statement because there's
Right.
mixes between those two. But I was naturally a visionary that would maybe fail in the day in and day out practicality of life. And so I wanted to do something great for the Lord, as people use that terminology, and I wanted to impact the kingdom and I wanted to serve the Lord and have this fruit to show for it 30 years down the road. And yet I wasn't able to get out of bed when my alarm went off. I was that
Yeah.
guy for so long. Versus, I compare myself to my older brother a lot of times where, and I'm not going to say that he doesn't have a vision, but he doesn't think 30 years down the road all the time, but he is just disciplined day in and day out. Like, he doesn't question whether or not he's going to get out of bed. He just does. And he got good grades and he's successful in his career just because that's the right thing to do that day. And so I always compare the polarizing, personalities there. And I really want to grow, in meeting in the middle of having that long-term vision, that 30-year vision, or that 30,000 foot vision, but then breaking it down to, okay, well then what do I do today? And am I faithful in stepping up and doing it today? And so I just love at this season in my life, I think that this is why I love what you're doing, Patrick, because it's so practical. I love practicality right now because we can all, everybody listening and you and I can say, man, we want to be godly fathers. We're like, yeah, awesome. We're all on the same page. That's great. But then what do we do when we get off this call? What's
Right.
the steps that we take to do that? And I'm in this season, especially since I'm so young and early on in my fathering and my marriage, I'm just so hungry for practicality. And so Katie and I oftentimes talk about the 30-year vision, but then we're I hope, students and learners of what people like you and Jessica are doing, or what our parents are doing, or what people 5 years down the road and 10 years down the road are doing. And then we say, okay, well, how can we apply that today or this week, and in the immediate future?
Yeah. So I got to ask, because this is something I struggle with from time to time, even struggle with it this week, is what was the change that you went through from when you weren't able to get out of bed when your alarm went off to now
Mhm.
you sounds like you get up regularly on time? Like, what
Sure.
what changed in your mindset there?
Yeah. Well, I'll be the first to say that I am not as consistent as I would hope to be with this. Like, I'm not a 7 days a week, 5 a.m. wake up guy, and crush my workout and memorize the Bible. I'm not that guy. I'd love to be that guy at some point in my life, but I can say that honestly, that I've grown to being more of that guy than what I was 3 years ago. And really, it's funny because I was convicted deeply about 2.5 or 3 years ago when I started listening to the words that I was saying. And I would say things like, man, I just want to be a loving husband. I want to be a loving husband, and I want to grow up children to know the Lord, and I want to be a spiritual warrior. And I would say things like, and then I'd ask questions like, I wonder what the Lord has for me. And as I'm asking these questions, I'm failing in the day in and day out things. And by failing, they might maybe weren't moral failures, they were just self-disciplined failures. And I think
Right.
this is, I make fun, I'm a millennial and I make fun of millennials all the time, but I can just remember being 19 and 20 and 21 years old, getting together with my buddies, and there's 3 or 4 of us, and we go out and we grab a beer or whatever it is, whatever us millennials do, and we start talking about theology, and we talk about C.S. Lewis, and we talk about John Edwards or whatever it is. And we think, man, I wonder what the Lord's going to do in our life. He's just really going to work through our lives. So we talk about deep stuff, and then we stay up way too late, and then we sleep in the next morning, and then we get to work late, and we're failing at just the practicality of life while being so consumed on the big vision of life. And so I was really convicted about 3 years ago when I realized that's exactly who I was. I was all talk and I was no action. And so, if anything, I've probably reverted to be more consumed with practicality, of what am I doing this minute? What am I doing this hour? That's a good thing to do. And that's a dangerous, road to walk, because it obviously can become legalistic and works based. But all I can say is that I was convicted about 3 years ago. And so that's what changed in my heart. It didn't just become I can get more out of life if I get up earlier. It's if I know that it's better for me to go to bed at 9:30 and wake up at 5 than it is for me to watch Netflix until 11, then wake up at 7:30. That's just, I don't care who you are. That's just in my mind, it's just better for me to do that. It's just a better thing.
Yeah, it sounds like you really realized that how you use your time and the efficiency with which you use it is really measuring how you're stewarding what God has given you as far as time. Like you said, it's not like necessarily a moral failure that you're going through, but you're not doing what you could with the time that God gave you.
Yeah.
And I like how you talked about, you have that 30,000 foot view, like I talked about with our vision for dad hackers.
Yeah.
But like, if you never bring it down to the 7 days a week, the day in, the day out, the hourly, you're never going to take those incremental steps that are eventually going to get you 30 years down the road where you want to get to. And so I'm curious, Elisha, what steps are you currently taking to get where you want to be 30 years from now? Or like, what's the process of bringing it from the 30,000 foot view down to like Friday morning at 7:30, or you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you transition from that big view all the way down to the granular day-to-day stuff?
Yeah. When I get disoriented and I forget about what I'm trying to do or where I'm trying to go, I try to always bring it down to as basic as I can. And my father-in-law speaks a lot about his giant five, and he likes it that he can put it on his one hand. And he says, okay, my walk with the Lord, my relationship with Jesus Christ, and how is my faith doing? And then my relationship with my wife, how's my marriage doing? And then how's my parenting? How are my children doing? How am I doing as a parent? And then my physical health, am I taking care of my physical health? Because I'm pretty useless if I'm not taking care of my physical health. And then my professionalism, or your career, or working in your unique God-given abilities. And so that's kind of a big picture giant five. And I like to come back to those and I ask those questions. Okay, if I feel like I've lost a vision, I go back to the basic. Okay, where am I at with my faith? Am I getting in God's word on a daily basis? And am I in prayer? Am I in fellowship with my fellow believers? And then I go, through to my marriage, my children, and my health. But then I also have my basic five. And so I've got my giant five, but then my basic five are, okay, well, if my giant five is my faith, my marriage, my children, my health, and my career, then my basic five is going to kind of align with those. It's just going to be a lot more simple, So my basic five is, okay, do I wake up and get in God's word? Do I get in God's word on a daily basis? Because I'll be the first to admit that I'll go days sometimes without opening the Bible. I mean, that's so embarrassing as a Christian man to admit to. But sometimes, like you said, Friday afternoon comes and you're disoriented and you're frazzled and you're thinking, who am I? Like, what the heck am I even doing with my life? And then I start breaking it down. I'm thinking, okay, well, that's right. Monday, I had that meeting in the morning, so I didn't get my time in God's word. And then Tuesday, I slept in. And then, you go down the line, I think, man, I haven't opened the Bible for 5 days. And so before I make any drastic decisions, I say, okay, well, before I, change my life too drastically, I just need to open the Bible. And I need to get into God's word and start being transformed by the renewing of my mind. I need to set my mind on things above, not on things of this earth. And so, getting in God's word and then just talking with my wife. That's my marriage. I need to connect with my wife. And then sitting down with my children. Am I training them on a daily basis? And then am I exercising my body? Because it's really remarkable to me how so many big things that seem like huge problems can come down to just physiological issues. I was like, man, I just need to eat better. I need to go to sleep earlier, and I need to exercise my body. And then all of a sudden I feel just much better about life. And it's crazy how when I neglect those things, everything seems daunting. And then am I being professional in my place of work? And am I putting my best foot forward? And so I don't know if that's answering your question, but because it's inevitable that you have those times of feeling overwhelmed. And so I like to try to break it down into that, okay, tomorrow morning, I need to read the Bible. I need to exercise my body. And just kind of, before I do anything else, I just need to do those things, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the big five and the base, or the giant five and the basic five. We have an Ironman mastermind group that we meet on Tuesdays for now, and we were just discussing all doing a 90-day plan together, a 90-day action plan. And we're going to have 7 pillars that we talk about.
Cool.
You need a hand and then like 2 more fingers on the
Yeah,
other
you know, you
to
can be
get
one
all
of
the,
those weirdos with 7 fingers on your hand.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, one of the giants from the Old Testament. Um,
exactly.
but anyway, yeah, and it's like faith, family, fitness, finance, friendships,
Yeah,
formation, which would be like personal development, and field, which would be like your career or your business
sure.
or your side hustle, whatever you're trying to do.
Yes.
And it's interesting the way you describe the big five versus the basic five, because like the big five are like the main categories and like
Yep.
your overall vision for that. And then the basic five is like the action step that you're going to take on a daily
Yes.
basis to
Yes.
see that you're hitting those different goals.
Right.
And I was going through some exercises today along the lines of filling out what are my giant five, or in
Yeah.
our case, the 7
Your
pillars,
pillars. Yeah.
in the action steps. And it was just amazing, like this rush or this flood of inspiration and hope and motivation that came just from writing that down,
Yes.
and like kind of walking through those. And there are things I've had in my head that
Right.
I don't always write them down. And that was very, very effective as far
Yes.
as that's
I believe
concerned for
it.
me. Yeah.
Good.
So that's cool. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So you got the giant five and the basic five. And so, how about like your 3-year plan, like the right in the middle? Like
Yeah.
what are your steps? Because yeah, I guess we went 30,000-foot view, which is like 30 years down the road. Now we're granular at the day-to-day, action steps we're taking. But how's the 3-year vision or the 3-year plan fit into that scheme of things?
Yeah, you know, the 3-year vision's becoming even more real to me than ever because I've been married for 3 years now,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think, man, that went fast because it's easy to say 3 years. When I first got married and saying 3 years from now, you can't really envision it because you haven't been married for 3 years. And so now that I've been married for 3 years, that 3-year vision's becoming so real to me where I'm thinking, okay, so many of these maybe habits that I've had in my life that I thought would just kind of take care, whether they're bad habits, they kind of take care of themselves. You know, the stuff that I eat, or maybe I watch way too much sports media. I'm a sports fan, you know, and so maybe I'm just way too caught up in the NBA playoffs right now. But these things that I'm not necessarily embarrassed about, but I'm not also proud of. You know, when I envision that Elisha Peter Voetberg as the father of, raising up a boy, maybe, being up to date with the top 5 NBA teams isn't who I actually want to be. And so what am I doing now so that 3 years from now that I'm actually going to change that? And where's my health going to be 3 years from now? And it's crazy how, especially since I've been married for three years now, that time goes by so quickly. And if you're not intentional, just nothing really changes in a positive way unless you're proactive in making that happen. And I think about, again, going back to the giant 5, because I think I look at my giant 5 through the lens of 30 years down the road, 3 years down the road, and then 30 days down the road. And I start thinking, okay, well, financially, where do I want to be? In my career as I'm working, do I want to be in a position where that I can own property for my children to run around on? Because right now we live in a suburban, or not, it's an inner city kind of apartment, and which is great. We love it for the season of life because we can walk everywhere we want to go. But 3 years from now, when I've got a almost 6-year-old son, where do I want to be? Because life's going to look a lot different. And what am I doing to actually get there? Because 30 years down the road, that just kind of gets you excited. It's just kind of an emotional feeling.
Yeah.
But then 30 days is so practical, but then you have to have that in between time where, okay, 3 years from now, a lot of things are actually possible. If I started saving now, if I started exercising now, if I started, this schooling program now, a lot can happen in 3 years, but you have to start now. And so I think that's why I really like that 3-year vision. I'm liking it more and more as 3 years has just gone in our marriage. And I think, man, for the next 3 years, how are we going to be in a different position how are we going to be more romantic? How are our children going to be, better children, and more disciplined? And how am I going to be in a better financial position? Because that's possible to do, but it requires action now.
Yeah, that's great, man. Yeah, I can really see how, like you said, the 30,000 foot view gets you excited, but it's really hard to imagine that really coming true. And then the 30 day, that's what you're doing on the day-to-day basis. But
Right.
having gone through a 3-year cycle now already, you can really see, like, what can I accomplish in 3 years? And conversely, what have I missed in 3 years
Yes.
that I could have? Because,
Yes.
I've done this too. I'm 15, almost 15 years in, and I can turn around now and look and say, wow, there's a lot of different stuff I could have done that
Sure.
would have
Yeah.
been
You must
way
have
more
fruit hanging on the
productive.
tree, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and then I can look and see where we've been from when we first got married and to now, and how much we've grown and matured and changed since then. And
Yes.
then, look at the next 3 years, or, the next 15 that are coming up.
Yeah.
And you're right, man. You think 3 years goes fast. Wait till you get to 15. And I'm sure your
Yeah.
in-laws and your parents will tell you, wait till you get to however
Yep.
many, and
Right.
it goes fast. It really
That's
does.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we're gonna have to wrap it up here, Elisha. It's been great talking to you. I mean, I don't even think we got maybe half of the way through the stuff that we were hoping to get through.
Oh
But
man, I'm sorry. It's probably way too long-winded there.
no, it's good. I like when we go deep, and I was a little overzealous with the amount of topics I thought we could cram in. So maybe we'll have to get back together and do another one sometime in
Yeah,
the future.
that would be fun.
But if people want to, we didn't really get to talk too much about what you and your wife are doing with the thing you have with Now That We're a Family. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how people can connect with what you're doing if they want to find out more? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So my wife and I both really enjoy writing. And so we started a blog called Now That We're a Family a while back. And then about 3 months ago, we started a podcast to go along with it. And, it's fun because Katie and I really don't view ourselves as a voice of authority when it comes to child training or marriage or anything family. But we do consider ourselves to be huge advocates. Like, we just love family, and we want to be a voice of encouragement, and we want to be cheerleaders to different families regardless of what stage they're at in life. And so we just started kind of documenting our life via podcast and blogs, and even on YouTube we're doing Now That We're a Family vlogs as well. And so if people want to check that out, it's just nowthatwe'reafamily.com, and you'll see articles written and different podcast episodes about what we're learning, what we're going through, what we're excited about in this journey of family. And it's all around just the topic of life as a family, because, as you've already talked about, I still have aspirations as a man, even though I'm a father, even though I'm a husband, I still have aspirations. And so I'm navigating kind of that ground right now and sharing my journey in those platforms. So you can find us at nowthatwe'reafamily.com, or you can find me on Instagram at nowthatimafather.com, or sorry, just on Instagram at nowthatimafather. And yeah, we're pretty active on all those places, and we're just really excited about life. We really, really like every day, but we also like the vision for the future as well.
Cool, man. Yeah, I'll definitely link all that stuff up in the show notes, and send that out to everybody so they can easily connect with you. And you have some good resources on your website too, in addition to the podcast, some downloadable things, and guys might want to take advantage of that. So if you're listening to this, make sure you go to the show notes and check out what Elisha's got going on
Awesome.
with his website. So one last question, Elisha, and I ask everybody, in your opinion, what makes a great dad?
I think a great dad has to be first, he has to be a great man of God. That's just it's so easy to be identified as one thing or another, and it's easy to fall into the identity of just, oh, I'm a dad, that's what I am. But before that, you're a new creation in Jesus Christ. Old things have passed away, behold, all things have become new. The old man was buried with Jesus Christ in the tomb, and now this newness of life that you live, you're raised again with Christ. You're dead to sin. You're freed from sin. And this life that you get to now live in faith, you're living as a new creation. And I think that if you can live in that reality, then the fatherhood is going to come from that, and you're going to be able to exemplify that to your child. And so being a good father, I think, first means being a good Christian, which is ultimately just being who God has made us to be through his own life, death, and resurrection.
Awesome, man. And that's like our vision with Dad Hackers, is to become the men that God has created and called us to be.
Hmm.
So good. Elisha, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your wisdom, your insight, and just all you have to say and all you have to share. I think is excellent. And I really liked our talk about being intentional with our time, because I know a lot of guys are going to really, really resonate with that, because that's what a lot of us need, man. So thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, Patrick, man, it was such a pleasure. I'm so inspired by what you're doing here. I'm so grateful to have you as a resource too, to share with other men in my life, that might be young like me, but are looking for people ahead of them to follow and to look to. So I'm really grateful that you're being faithful in this journey, and faithful in this work. And I really want you to keep up the fight, and keep the journey going.
Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate that. And so we'll talk again soon, man. You take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Bye-bye.
All right, take care. All right, guys. Well, there's our interview with Elisha. I hope you enjoyed this show. I know that I got a lot out of it, and I hope you did as well. Why don't you reach out to me and let me know? Give me some feedback. Let me know what you thought about this talk that I had with Elisha today. Now, please check out the show notes at dadhackers.us/056. There, I put some links for ways that you can get in touch with Elisha and things that he's doing with now that we're a family. And also, while you're there, make sure you check out the free resources that we have. And if you're not a part of our private Facebook group, you can check that out there as well. I wanted to also tell you about the Ironman Mastermind that we have going on. This is a great resource for guys that really want to level up in life. They want to take charge of their time. They want to take charge of their relationships. We're doing some great things in this meeting that we meet virtually every week. And we're having some great results. The guys in there are loving it, and we're doing some really good things. Now, this is a monthly membership type thing. You can check out more about the Ironman Mastermind in the show notes. There's a link for that as well. All right, gentlemen, until next time, remember Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another.